And welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. This morning, Florida. Ron DeSantis and his, we're going to talk about that. Yeah, you know what I mean. And we're going to talk about the sentencing of Tory Lanez. Some say 10 years was just enough. Some say it was too much, and others say it was not enough. Well, we'll discuss this morning. And Clarence Thomas is at it again, back in the news again. A huge expose. This time, once again, ProPublica has released new details of his alleged ethical violations. We'll discuss that. And Brett Favre is still trying to get out of paying Mississippi back the millions taken from the state's welfare fund for use other than anything credible. We're going to discuss all that and more with attorney Robert Tarver of the Tarver Law Firm in New Jersey. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's so much crazy stuff, Attorney Tarver. So much crazy. I think everybody needs an attorney.
Well, everybody needs an attorney, and everybody probably needs a sedative too.
And a shrink, as they say. Well, we'll start out obviously in Florida, and it's like 1861 in Florida all the time under Ron DeSantis. He likes to call Florida the free state, or the free state of Florida, he would say. And if he hasn't yet wrapped himself in the 10th Amendment or threatened succession, it's only because he's been too busy playing soldiers, organizing his private battalion and rewriting the past and trying to destroy democracy altogether. We talked the other day about his sidelining, suspending Monique Worrell, the state prosecutor there, the elected state prosecutor. This guy, Attorney Tarver, the federal bench, the appeals court said, he's wrong, but there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, he's out of control here, and we've been using these words, unprecedented, all those adjectives that we throw around. They no longer have any meaning because it's no longer unprecedented when he acts in a crazy fashion, when he acts in a lawless fashion, and when he acts in a fashion that offends the Constitution. This is now the norm for Ron DeSantis, and this is now the norm for Florida. Look, I've been a prosecutor. I was a prosecutor for many years, handled those cases. Prosecutors' mandate and a prosecutor's job is not to lock people up. The prosecutor's job is to do justice. And what that requires is that you look at each case individually and say, what is just in this case? What is right in this case? And so Ron DeSantis and the other right-wing crazies have it confused because you cannot conflate justice with retribution, which is what they're doing. They're saying that, because this happens, you've got to destroy, this other person's life. Well, there are so many factors in between that weigh in one way or another. And yes, many times it calls for crazy, outrageous sentences, but many times it doesn't. And that's why every state, when you have considerations of how to sentence somebody, you have what we would loosely call aggravating factors, the things that show why a person should be put away or incarcerated, and you have mitigating factors, the factors that show why a person should be granted some form of leniency. And I know for a fact that Ron DeSantis has not sat in each one of those cases to determine what the factors were, why Monique Worrell and her office made decisions of how they were going to deal with these people. So it's a knee-jerk reaction, but it's a predictable right-wing regressive action that we would expect out of somebody like Ron DeSantis.
And I want to kind of segue to our theme of this with Florida and succession. Most serious students of the Civil War are familiar with the 4 states declarations of causes issued by succession conventions of South Madison, Stark Perry, governor of Florida, and Colonel 7th Florida Volunteers, Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, and Texas. A fifth such document was prepared. I was reading this information provided by Greer. A fifth such document was prepared by the Florida Secession Convention, but never formally published. But when you look at Florida and its and the governor DeSantis, as we've been talking about, it's as if he's acting in total autonomy, not just as governor, but just when you think about the United States of America, it's DeSantis. It's that you might as well rename Florida DeSantis or DeSantis land.
Well, he clearly wants to take everyone back to pre 1865. They've made it very clear, not just in Florida and not just with DeSantis, that they're looking to turn the clock back. And they're looking to turn the clock back on rights. And what's the first thing you do when you want to turn the clock back and when you want to regress? Well, you rewrite history. You rewrite history so that people don't even recognize where they have come from. There's a really interesting book. It's called Sleepwalking Through History, and it chronicles the Reagan years of the 1980s. Well, that phrase is the phrase that we should be attaching to America right now in 2023. We are sleepwalking through history. And you look, it's a cliche. They say those who fail to remember the past are doomed to repeat it. They want to make sure that we not only don't remember the past, but if we do remember it, they want us to remember the past in a way that favors what they're doing now. So they want us to see a time when Black people were happy about slavery, when we were harmonious with the white slave owners, when there was no violence, and when the benevolent white slave owner took care of us as Black people. Well, that ain't the way history actually was. The fact of the matter is that we have allowed them to move forward with this in Florida and other states. And at some point, Stacy, someone has to stand up and say, this is a problem. And when I say someone standing up, I'm talking about people from our community. We are strangely, eerily silent on these things. We hear, you hear diverse voices here and now. You hear me on the radio and on television, you and others, but where are our major leader figures? We have none who are able to capture the moment. And that's what these times require. People who are able to capture the moment. It's disheartening. It's very disheartening.
Yeah, and this goes back to discussions people love to have about quote Black leaders and names you hear. I mean, look, let's face it. King has been you know gone for what 55 years, and Jesse Jackson is his battling Parkinson's, and let's not even mention Al Sharpton. Sharpton, people forget, was not a part of the civil rights movement. And Sharpton is, he pops up where there is a check to be had, as according to many people. So, the NAACP is not what it used to be. So what they've done, we know the NAACP has issued this travel advisory to Florida and cautioning folks, hey, this is what's going on in Florida. Go at your own peril, basically. So you're right. Where is that going to come from? Where's it coming from?
Look, I respect all of those historical figures. I respect Reverend Sharpton for what he's done. But look, he's made decisions about where he wants to be right now. He's a media figure. His National Action Network is still functioning. They still do really good work. But, if you look at the model of the civil rights movement, you will find that not only were there strong figures who stood up from the political stage, but there were strong figures from the entertainment and sports phases. And that's what helped to create this synergy of ideas, this whole melding of ideas where you could get people together for a movement. A movement has to be greater than one person. Civil rights gains were not made because of Dr. King. They were not made simply because of Malcolm X. They were not made because of Stokely Carmichael or any of the other figures that we know about. It was made because of the synergy of those people. You had people who just even like the late Tony Bennett, who stood up for civil rights in the 1960s and 70s. And so there has to be a galvanizing of individuals. We don't have that yet. And perhaps we don't have that yet because people still don't recognize where we are. We are right now flat dead in the middle of 1844 in terms of where things are in this country and where people are trying to take us. We have seen the erosion of laws. We have seen the erosion of constitutions. And let me just say this about the Monique Wardwell situation. What is so troubling about this? The only thing we have in a democracy and in this country is the ability to elect people to move us in a direction that we believe it should go. That's our only way of dealing with anything short of violence. So when you take that away, as Ron DeSantis has done, where does this stop? He could just make a determination that, you know what, I don't like how she is dealing with X, Y, or Z, which is what he's done, and remove this. And he could do that for any figure in criminal and civil justice in the state of Florida. And what that means is that you have no vote. The people who voted in Orlando, you have no vote. You have no say because it has been usurped by a governor who decided that his voice was more important than yours.
And about it is all that you said. You see too. Donald Trump didn't like the election results in 2020. They were very close. Folks don't realize how close they were to overturning that election. You see Kerry Lake didn't like the results of that election, and it remained in court until just within the last several weeks, trying to fight last November's election. This is so I say all that to say it's spreading. This is not just going to be a Florida thing. We're seeing pockets here, and we see what Governor Abbott has done in Texas with. We just talked about the libraries, the school libraries, and what they're doing, making them detention centers basically for students. And what Governor Abbott has done, Trump talked about building this wall, and with the immigration, we see what he's done now. He's basically all but said shoot him on sight, you know. So this is the scary thing is that what we're seeing in Florida, we see Alabama. They've ignored the Supreme Court's decision there. We see Mississippi, Jackson, the black city, being taken over. The elected mayor being basically stripped of his authority. So this is not just Florida.
This is why I said 1844, because this was the beginning of secession talks in the United States, serious secession talks. And what had happened in American history is that we had reached a point where the two sides were intransigent. They weren't able to move. There was no way that Southern states and their ideology was going to be able to meld with the Northern states and their ideology. They were stuck where they were. There was no movement. And so the only thing that they could do in their minds was to separate. And that's really where we are. We're at a point where people are not able to move in the way that they're looking. And not only are they not able to move, but they're willing to ignore what has been standard and conventional and even constitutional law to get to where they want to go. And anytime the ends justifies the means in getting past whatever laws you have, you no longer have a stable democracy. So we don't have a stable democracy right now because the true fact is that right-wing white supremacist wing is willing to do whatever they need to do, including subvert laws. And there's no question that we see that, including subvert laws to get to the ends, which is where they want to get to. And the end is subversion of Black America and putting us into a particular place and ensconcing white supremacy. And there's no debate about this anymore. There's no question about where they are anymore. The fact of the matter is that what's so incredible is that we've gotten here so quickly over the past, I guess, 8 years or 7 years with the advent of Donald Trump, which shows you that this sentiment has been lying just slightly below the surface, and all he did was flick the scab off.
Listen, it's also why people say you hear some criticism with the Montgomery boat brawl, how black people have reacted, and but isn't this why we see so many African Americans react the way they did when they saw the Montgomery boat brawl? In fact, Power 96 is saying we should send you, Attorney Tarver, down to Montgomery. He says because the chairman, the guy with the chair, is meeting with Montgomery police today. He probably should have you with him.
It's interesting, because whenever something like that happens, you feel vindicated. When you've been held down so long and when you're getting trampled, and that's what's happening to us every day in America right now. And I'm not just talking about on the larger political level that we're talking about. Even in our communities, our smaller communities, we're getting trampled on. Black men and women see their rights being eroded every day, and we're tired of it. The problem is we don't have a cohesive, coherent national strategy for dealing with white supremacy. And what that requires is that we mimic the same model that white supremacists have used. They set up all these foundations, these organizations, and they put their money where their mouth was in order to be able to support those organizations in fighting against what they wanted to fight against. We don't do that. Number one, we haven't developed the organizations, and number two, we don't spend the money. The financial power of Black America is immense, but we don't spend our money on those things. But we will buy some sneakers, and we will buy some purses, and we will buy certain things, and we just have to reorient ourselves because the time is now. There are certain times in history, I believe, where you either have to they're pivotal moments, and it's one where you can either go forward or you risk going backward and not being able to control your destiny for decades. I believe we're at one of those moments, and unless we recognize it, we're doomed.
Yeah, speaking of sneakers, I just yesterday I've never spent when I buy myself when I have bought myself sneakers, Attorney Tarver, I never spent more than maybe about 40, $50, right? If that. I bought my daughter yesterday a pair of Jordans, $140. Um, I
Yeah.
would have rather had bought her anything but Jordans, but
Yeah.
that whatever.
But
That's
let's
a
be
whole
serious. Where are my entertainers? Where are my entertainers in? Do they not see the moment? Where is Oprah? Where are my people who have influence to be able to strongly speak? And I'm not talking about this. Oh, we have a problem. We're mine. This mealy type of thing. You have to take a stand here,
is
and
it
not
that
only
there's too much going on? It's so much going on that we're pulled like in different so many different directions. Is it that
I,
we don't see anybody really standing up?
for the average American, yes. For the average American, it is. We're in treadmill mentality, where if you miss a step on that treadmill, it will change your life. So you've got to get up in the morning at
Are we losing Attorney Tarver?
issues. And that's the kind of sleepwalk that we're doing through history. And they take advantage of the fact that we are in those particular places. But you know what? It's always been like that. And it's about people making a decision that they are no longer going to be so self-interested that their destiny has to be controlled at this point in time. And those of us who have children have to recognize that we are doing what we're doing to support our children and our grandchildren and our children's children's grandchildren.
And again, I'm going to mention this again because Nakia Cooper is watching, and she writes in, "What we saw in Montgomery is Black people fighting for the George Floyds of the world. We will never let any one of us be killed at the hands of whites in front of us. Hat in the air, it's on." Um, it could. Do you think that might be the moment that could be transformational as far as all of what we're talking about? Could that be the spark to say, okay, now we must stop. We must swim across that bayou and stop DeSantis and stop Abbott, et cetera, and Trump and everyone else.
I don't think so. It's not a moment that has, although it had national interest, it's not a moment that has national significance.
Mm.
The George Floyd matter had national significance because it was an issue that all of us dealt with on a regular basis. and it was an issue of police reform, and it was a strong issue that everyone could latch onto. This felt good, it looked good, and it was important because it was important for people to see Black people standing up to protect other Black people. Yeah, well, you know what? As Malcolm X said, there will come a time when Black people will stand up for other Black people, and they'll recognize that we have a common destiny, and that's when the Black man, woman, will take their rightful place. I don't think we've gotten there. And I don't think we've gotten there because we are purposefully distracted. We are purposefully distracted by our economy. We are purposefully distracted by our particular situations in this country. And we are purposely distracted by our music and entertainment.
And speaking of which, Mike V is saying, where's Ice Cube at with contract with Black America? He calls him Mr. America. KKK was most wanted. Um, Now, I mentioned that too because when you see someone like an Ice Cube, when you see someone like a Steve Harvey go to the quote unquote dark side, I mean, it's is that does it deflate folks in the Black community?
It not only deflates those who are socially conscious, but it influences those who are not. And so I'm looking the other day and I see Trump with this DJ academics, uh, you know, looking at the Fonnie Willis thing. Look, we have gotten to the point where, you know what, if you're an entertainer and you have not educated yourself in our situation, then stay home and shut up. You do so much more harm than you can do good. But so many of our people have been co-opted, and they've been co-opted because they confuse economic success with the success of Black people overall, and they think that because they've been able to make it for whatever happenstance, we should all be able to do that. And that's a trap. That's a trap of the wealthy to make you think that everyone in America can make it. Well, that's not the fact of the matter. That's not true. Everyone in America cannot make it. And you specifically cannot make it when a man has his foot on your neck. And unfortunately, that has been the history of Black America in this country, that a foot has been on our neck economically, a foot has been on our neck socially, foot has been on our neck constitutionally. And until we all stand up collectively and get that foot off, we're going to just be in the same situation.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about more of those individuals like Ice Cube and Steve Harvey and others, and a little bit later because we got to talk about that's horrible. We're gonna talk about Clarence Thomas shortly, but first, Attorney Tarver Deputy District Attorney Alex Bott said Tory Lanez called Megan Thee Stallion a liar and intimidated her and harassed her for the past 2.5 years. He says not only did the defendant do the heinous act of shooting her, he then subjected her to 2.5 years of quote unquote hell.
Mm.
And seeking a shorter sentence, however, Tory Lanez's lawyers argued for probation and said he should be released from jail to a residential substance abuse program. They claim that he has alcohol abuse disorder, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress from the unexpected death of his mother when he was 11 years old. Now, the charges that he faced, Attorney Tarver, and was convicted on all three felony. There was assault with a semi-automatic firearm, possession of a concealed unregistered firearm, and negligent discharging of a firearm. 10 years, Attorney Tarver, has been the debate. Um, and unfortunately, we see this divided along the lines of Black men and Black women. And let me just say this: she was shot in her feet. She was shot. And they point out she was shot in her feet. But the point is, you shot someone. Um, there should be punishment, right?
I don't know what to say. You just said it all. You shot her with a gun, which is capable of causing what we call serious and significant bodily injury and capable of taking her life if used improperly. So, what is there to argue about? 10 years is an appropriate sentence.
He was facing 22.
Could have been more, but it sounds like this judge took into account the situations that they put forward. Now, again, we talked about this earlier in the show. Justice is not always just saying, you know what, you did this, you're going away. It's taking into account all the circumstances that put a person where they are and why they did what they did. It sounds like this judge did the appropriate thing. But for people who are out there saying that there should have been probation or this and that, you know, we have come to the point where we are starting to accept violence as a way of life, as a way of solving things. And until we get to the point where we put things in the proper perspective, it's going to present a problem for our communities. Our communities are overrun with violent acts, and it starts at the top. Our entertainers, our celebrities are running around carrying guns, slapping people in public, doing all manner of things, misbehavior. Why do you think other people feel licensed to do it, you know, in our communities? There was a time, Stacy, when Black men took a protective role toward Black women, where they stood up for the dignity of Black women, where they wouldn't allow anyone to even talk badly about a Black woman. And yet, as you said, there is this whole schism, this divide of Black men who somehow are coming to this man's defense. I don't care who he is. He's a monster for shooting this woman for no reason except
no remorse. The judge even admonished him.
Yeah.
And still gave him 10 years instead of the 22 that prosecutors had sought. And the thing about it was that let me ask you this question instead of me making a statement, Attorney Tarver. How important is it that you accept some responsibility? How important is it that your convicted client, not that you have any convicted clients, but but how important is that a convicted individual express remorse? Could that play into the sentencing?
I repeatedly see judges every day that I practice. When people do not express remorse, sentence goes up. Sentence goes. I've seen judges turn down pleas because people will not, express remorse. I've seen changes in sentences because people did not express remorse. If you have no remorse, then you are doomed to repeat the same pattern over and over again because there's no change. Remorse is the indication that you have done something wrong, that you recognize that you did something wrong, and that you are willing to move on a different path than where you were. So what this says is, hey, I'll do it again.
You know, he said to the judge, he said to the judge, "Don't ruin my life." Would you have, and so that brings me to this. Would you have allowed your client? I mean, the person does what they want, but would you how would you have? I'm sure you would have told your client not to say something like that.
Well, what we do is we sit down with clients beforehand, before sentencing, and we say exactly what you're going to, this is what you're going to say. It'll come from you, but this is what you're going to say. But what is evident in that statement is the whole ball of wax. And that is that this is a selfish and self-concerned individual, only concerned about where he stands. And so he has always put himself first. He's put himself first in this circumstance, and he doesn't give a rat's butt about how she feels or anyone else feels. Don't ruin my life. Well, I got to tell you something, Mr. Lanez, you ruined your life, not this judge, not Meg. No one but you made that decision to pull that trigger. And people have to be held accountable for those types of things. It's time that we stop excusing misbehavior, bad behavior, crazy behavior by Black men and women.
And there's certain lanes that I don't really want to go down because we are two men talking, but um, I saw people say this. I saw so many people say this, which is a little disconcerting as well. Um, she said Megan had talked about how she'd been depressed afterwards for all this time, and of course she's been afraid. And I've seen these tweets and posts that said, well, the moment you got out of the hospital, you were twerking again. I mean, as if that has anything to do with what happened, yesterday.
Yeah.
And is that part of what's going on here too, Attorney Tarver, that we see so much the big artists, the not so big artists. We see the Megans, the Cardi B's, the the Nicki Minaj's, et cetera, et cetera. The women hip hop artists, they're you know, the twerking, show much skin showing. We saw that crazy boyfriend of uh, what's her name when she went to Usher's concert, the pretty girl that went to Usher's concert, and he got all bent out of shape because what she was wearing. Um, is that part of this culture that has certain men saying, you know, Tory should not have been in prison, should not be going to prison?
Yeah, well, we gonna do a whole show on this culture and how this culture has robbed us of our proper understanding of respect for men and women. That's a whole different story. But look, she's an entertainer. First and foremost, as I understand it, that never happened. That she's out twerking right after.
Right, right.
So,
But even she was.
but let's assume that it did. She's an entertainer, and that's what she does. It doesn't diminish the fact that this man decided he was going to take a handgun and shoot her, and he could have done that with anybody. That's what you have to recognize. Just because it's her and you feel a certain way about her doesn't mean that it could be you or your loved one tomorrow that he felt disrespected them or he had a feeling about. And that's what we need to concentrate on. It's not about who the victim is. It's about who the perpetrator is and what he's capable of. And what he's shown is that he's capable of incredible acts of violence. He's capable of disrespecting women, and he's capable of doing it again because he has no remorse. So we shouldn't even entertain any discussion about this victim because it doesn't matter that it's her. Unless
Right.
she had done something physically to him to cause self-defense, none of that stuff matters. And we get caught off guard with these types of arguments, and we start going down the rabbit hole of blaming the victim for a lot of these acts. And I mean, this case was particularly disgusting of how they treated her, and particularly how women.
Yeah, they were women.
It was
Yeah.
it was sad. It was very
Mhm.
reminiscent of the 1950s and 60s. Well, if she hadn't worn that miniskirt, maybe she would not have gotten raped type of mentality.
Mhm. Yeah. And Megan the Stallion said that this all started because they got into an argument because she was ready to leave the party. I was at a party at Kylie Jenner's home and she was ready to leave. Um, I wouldn't have went in the first place, Kylie Jenner, but that's another story. Uh, but they got into an argument because she was ready to leave. She said she was ready to go, and everybody else wasn't. But that's normal friend stuff. She said. She says it shouldn't have gotten this crazy. She said he she gets out of the car, and it's like everything happened so fast. These are her words. She says, and all I hear is this man screaming, and he says to me, "Dance, bitch," calling her the B word. And he started shooting. And I'm like, she says, "Oh my God, he shot a couple of times and I was scared." She says he's standing up over the window shooting, and I didn't even want to move. I was too afraid to move. I didn't want to move too quick, she said. She says, I don't know if he's gonna shoot something that's like super important. I don't know if he could shoot me and kill me. So this is the horror she was going through in the moment. But the point is, he got upset because she wanted to leave. So that set you off enough to shoot someone?
Why are we even talking about it, Stacy? Why are we even talking about that? Because we're avoiding the very first question. Why do you have a semi-automatic weapon? Why?
Why?
Why do you have a semi-automatic weapon? Why? Why do you have it? For protection? You know what? If you're a celeb and you've got that kind of money, then you hire security. Why are you running around with that weapon? That's already unlawful. So if we're willing to accept that in the very beginning, that's where we make our first mistake. Everything that follows from that unlawful act is the problem. You shouldn't have had that weapon. And so if you can't control your anger or your temper or your ability to modulate how you treat other people, then it's going to be it's going to come out in what you have to deal with. So he had that weapon.
Yeah, Greer has a video response of this. Let's take a look.
Megan in LA by herself. It's just her and T. Ferris. She ain't got a mama no more. Her mama is gone. Her daddy is gone. Her grandmother is gone. All the people that loved her and cared about her unconditionally, that looked out for her and would have protected her, ain't there. So as an OG in Houston, I'm standing up. Tory Lanez did some whole ass shit. Period. Yeah, I know Tory. I know his manager. I know all of them, man. Fuck all that, though. Fuck all that. If the man on drugs, get him some goddamn rehab. If the man got mental health issues, get him some therapy. But you're not just going to sit here and shoot this girl and we not say nothing. This shit not real. This is not real nigga shit. It's not. Anytime a man hurts a woman, that's obsession. That ain't love. That's obsession.
Yeah, well, you know,
I didn't know the language was going to be there, but folks. So if you offended, we apologize.
I think that he and I were saying the same thing.
I think you were saying the same thing, but you were saying it in legal speak.
Well, you know, again, it highlights exactly what I was saying. Someone has to call this out for what it is, and I'm happy to see it being called out for what it is. Again, gang culture has been glorified in our community. It has destroyed our community. It was pointed out so eloquently by Minister Farrakhan when he talked about how we can't even identify who the real enemy is in our communities anymore, because now those people are the enemies. And the Tory Lanez and the people who carry those guns and use them unlawfully are the enemy of Black America. And I'm not afraid to say it. We have to identify our enemies, and he's one of them. So we need to start talking about these things in strict terms of what they are and who's hurting us, who's killing us, and who's destroying us and our children, and do something about it.
Power 96 says something that's real. He says, I bet the CEO of his rap label will get paid while he's in prison. And that is another whole nother show, right? I mean, this is what happens. We've heard the story so much, especially of late. In fact, Meek Mill did a panel for the NAACP recently, and he talked about how they get paid more to have certain lyrics degrading Black people in their records. And you know, it's
just remember, none of this stuff. You know, we have Luke to thank for all this, Luke and 2 Live Crew, because none of this stuff until that particular case that allowed for those types of lyrics to be in songs. You know, did this happen? Now, I'm not casting judgment on that, but in the way that they are used and in the way that they have that they have captured the minds of the young people in our community, that's a problem. Yeah. And it's a problem when you start making violence the hallmark of Black America. And that's where we're headed. And
well, there's a question for you from Mike V, Attorney Tarver. He's asking you, Attorney Tarver, what is the attraction for our women to these type of men in our community? Tarver's like, why are you asking me that?
I'm the wrong one to answer that. I mean, look, hey, you know what? Women like bad boys. I don't know what to say. You know, but this is I think part of the problem is who we have attached a figure of respect and masculinity to, and what we've done is we've now attached a figure of respectability, masculinity, to these gangster type figures, to people who are bad boys, who are outside of lawful behavior. And you know, that's what we're stuck with. That's what we're stuck with.
Yeah, and by the way, that was Bun B, and Nakia Cooper says, and for him to go off like that, it shows the outrage behind it. And you know, she brings up the point we was talking about. Tory telling the judge, they're telling the judge that, you know, he's post-traumatic stress from losing his mother when he was 11. Well, she lost everyone. Michelle Madison is saying something here that I hope Barrington and/or Austin is watching right now, because Michelle says No apologies needed for the cursing. We are used to our great and outspoken leader, Brother Barrington. That is classic. Absolutely classic. Um, yeah, it's a that question Mike V asked you though. It's really I like the way you answered it. I think it's that whole it's that whole bad boy mentality.
It's toxic masculinity.
Hmm.
And again, we have attached that. It is not the academic. It's not the guy who's striving to do, to build, or to be an entrepreneur. That's not the guy that we build up in our community. That's not the guy that we glorify. That's
Yeah.
not the guy you see on social media. What you see on social media is the person who's the outlier, who is often violent, who is often disrespectful to women, who has certain expectations of women to be taken care of. And we've allowed those images to be portrayed and to be thrust to the forefront of our communities. And what do we expect for young people to do but to emulate what they see in their cultural icons?
Yeah, yeah. Now social media has really taken it to a whole different level.
Yeah.
Unreal. Attorney Tarver, we got to talk about, unfortunately, we got to talk about Clarence Thomas. And what Sherilyn Eiffel tweeted was a crisis, or is a crisis, that everyone needs to start treating as such.
Yeah.
His 3 decades on the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas has enjoyed steady access to a lifestyle most Americans can only imagine. A cadre of industry titans and ultra wealthy executives have treated him to far-flung vacations abroad and aboard their yachts, ushered him into the premium suites at sporting events, and sent their private jets to fetch him, including on more than one occasion an entire 737. It's a stream of luxury that is both more extensive and from a wider circle than had been previously understood. These the
Well,
new report.
I guess it's because he has such a magnetic personality and he's such a fascinating figure, a wonderful conversationalist, that they decided to spend this money on him. I guess it's because he's got so much to say. He's such an exciting figure with his previous, bubbly past. You think that's what it is?
Someone
No.
bought his mother a house. One of these donors, one of these people bought his mother a house.
They are buying influence, and just because you cannot connect him directly to this, the fact is that he should not be engaging in anything that looks improper. The whole idea of the Supreme Court's persona is that they are above the fray, that they're not subject to outside influence. That's what should be happening. But the Roberts Court is worse than we've ever seen any particular court in America, because the Roberts Court is one that allows for all types of outside influence to take place. It's not just Clarence Thomas, it's Alito, but Clarence Thomas has taken it to a whole new level. And
Yes.
any judge in any other state that engaged in this type of behavior would have his robe ripped off of him. You cannot do this in any other state in America. We should expect more from the Supreme Court.
He has also, and this not just Publica has found this, the New York Times has also found that he has given access to the Supreme Court building for Horatio Alger events, and the access, at least $1,500 per person, is paid him for this access.
Yeah. He's a grifter. He's just a grifter at heart. He is just like Donald Trump. He's only out for himself. He's engaged in self gratification, and he's shameless about it. And not only that, here's probably the worst part: he has an obligation to report these things.
Which he
He has
has.
an obligation to let America know, to let the courts know, to let the Congress know, to let everyone know what kind of money is flowing into his household and what he's doing with his life. When you accept that position as a Supreme Court justice, you also accept the idea that you must modify your lifestyle and live in a way that is above reproach. Clarence Thomas has done the exact opposite. He has said, I'm going to use my position to get material things and to enjoy my life. And the fact that the way that we know that this is so, that he's done it just because of who he is that none of these people were in his life before he was a Supreme Court justice. All of these people came afterward. All of these gifts came afterward. These flights came afterward. These lavish vacations and these yacht excursions came after he became a Supreme Court justice. This is corruption at its worst.
Yeah, and he said in 2001 that he didn't he's he says he didn't ascend to the Supreme Court because it paid well. He's he,
But you know what? Look, it doesn't pay particularly well. You could probably make more in corporate America, but think of the cost of all these things. They have valued the cost of all this to be millions,
millions.
multiple millions, tens of millions of dollars over the years. And so it blows my mind.
It really does. And here's the problem is it's multifold. It's a multifold problem because there are millions of dollars. Big problem. He never disclosed it. Right. It had to be found out.
Right.
Right. And the perhaps even bigger problem. These people, these individuals have argued or have had cases before the Supreme Court in which he did not recuse himself from.
Yeah. And that's
They and each time his ruling was in their favor.
Yeah, that's the most serious thing, and that's the corruption right there. The idea that you could buy justice for whatever cause that you're looking for, at the rate of a vacation or a trip or something else like that. These people know what they're doing. These people who are financing him, they know exactly what they're doing. They are cozying up to one of the people who can make real policy change in America. And if you don't believe that, just look at the recent decisions of the United States Supreme Court that have changed the face of abortion, have changed the face of voting rights, have changed the face of even simple things like foreclosures. Now, people want to say, oh, these guys didn't have cases before the Supreme Court, but you know what? Wayne Huizenga has incredible real estate ventures, and the cases that the Supreme Court decided dealt directly with foreclosures and real estates and how that is now going to favor different individuals, particularly someone like Mr. Huizenga. So it's a lie, it's a sham, and it's corrupt.
Yeah, Huizenga, who owned the Blockbusters and other things, that he was one of the people who have bestowed these luxury gifts upon Justice Thomas. For those who don't know why Tarver was mentioning Huizenga, he used to also own the Miami Dolphins, right?
Absolutely, the Dolphins, another sports team. I can't remember what other sports team it was, but yeah, the man's filthy rich, and I guess he just decided that Clarence Thomas was an attractive figure because, as I said, his magnetic personality, which we see on display every day from Clarence Thomas. Heck
Yeah,
no.
and we talked earlier in this program about people like Ice Cube and others. Now this is even, would you say this is even a bigger problem than Ice Cube? This guy here?
Well, it's a different kind of problem. It's a different kind of problem. Clarence Thomas, he has the ability to affect national policy, yes.
Mhm.
But even a person like Ice Cube and these other individuals who are dealing, dabbling in the world of politics, they have the ability to also affect policy because, elections are won or lost at the margins. Whether or not you get enough people out to vote, whether or not you get people who understand what their interests are. And in a way, these two individuals are alike. They both are acting against the interests of millions and millions of Black Americans. And somebody has to say it. Whether you can like Ice Cube, you can like his music, and you can like his movies, but you can also call out where he is a danger to America in many cases, as you can with many of these other people. You can like Clarence Thomas. I don't know many people who do, but you can also call out where he is a danger to America, not just Black America.
Him and others, they climb the ladder and kick it down so no one else can, no one else of color anyway. So
I'm not going to name the attorney, but I know an attorney who went to school with Clarence Thomas, and he is livid. He is absolutely livid at what has happened to Clarence Thomas and his behavior. He can't understand it. He can't make sense of it. Many of us cannot, but I think it is rooted somehow in the vestiges of self-hatred.
and that's a perfect graph there. The wheels of controversy, Supreme Court for sale. Unreal. Speaking of Supreme Court, the Mississippi Supreme Court says it will not remove NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre as a defendant in a civil lawsuit that seeks to recover millions of dollars of misspent welfare money meant to help some of the poorest people in the United States. The panel of 3 judges issued a brief ruling denying an appeal from Brett Favre. His attorney said that they felt like the case against him, the Mississippi Department of Human Services, is utterly meritless. I mean, this guy, Attorney Tarver, what happened here? It's criminal.
It is criminal. In any state, anywhere in the country, we have laws for misconduct and misuse of governmental funds. That's really what happened here. He took funds that were meant to help people and enriched himself, realistically. Now, the motion that was filed, that's a regularly perfunctory, as we call it, regular motion. It's just a motion to dismiss. It was never going to be granted. There was no realistic chance, because the questions that are presented here are what we call questions of fact. Did he act in a certain way, or did he spend money in a certain way, or did he engage in those actions, as opposed to a question of law, which is whether or not he can legally be held accountable. Yes, he can legally be held accountable. Now we'll have to decide in a court of law whether or not the facts meet up with his behavior, meet up with the legal standard.
Wow, it's really interesting the amount of money. They used $5 million for a volleyball arena at the university he attended, and where his daughter was playing there, and $1.7 million toward the development of a concussion treatment drug.
Yeah.
And it was another 1.1 million for something else that he supposedly has repaid, but has refused to repay the 5 million, and the 1.7, so 6.7 million he's refused to repay. The 1.1 million was for speeches that he never gave.
Yeah. And again, that's provable. That's provable. So I don't know where he's going with this. What happens is that a lot of the public figures get their proverbial what on their shoulders and decide that they can get away with what they need to get away with. But the facts are what they are, and these are provable facts. I have no idea how he thinks he can get past this. And just because you're a celebrity, and just because you're and he is a revered figure in Mississippi. He's a legend down there, which is part of the reason why he was able to get away with a lot of this stuff. But you know what? That legend status can only go so far, because you ain't playing football no more.
Nope.
So we'll see where that goes. I don't think it's going to go very far or very well for him.
Well, it is, you would think, Attorney Tarver, that, so this is all civil, right? You would think that he would have just gave the money back to try and kill the noise a little bit anyway, right?
You would think that. But you know what? you never know what someone, even to someone where we believe that they're in a certain financial status, you never know what their true financial status is. And we don't
Right.
even know if he has $5 million to pay back, or we don't know what the impact would be to him in paying it back. So, he may just get to the point where a judgment may be better off for him than paying back that amount of money, because at least with a judgment, he can control how some of that money gets paid out.
Yeah. Well, be interesting to see as this civil case moves forward. A lot of people in Mississippi have been shouting at the hills, saying that he should be brought up on criminal. Others have been brought up on criminal charges. Some have even pled guilty um, and had their cases adjudicated. But
Mississippi is the poorest state in the nation.
the,
It is the poorest state in the nation. And to take those funds, which are meant to alleviate the suffering of poor individuals, and divert them into, recreational facilities that those people are never going to get the chance to use,
never.
that is criminal, because it's an intentional act to do something that is illegal, which is diverting those funds, which are governmental funds, for your own good and your own purposes.
Wow. Brett Favre. That's Brett Favre. Timothy Williams says that white privilege wouldn't let him turn the money back over. Whatever the reason, he it shouldn't have happened in the first place.
No, it should not have. It should not have. But again, it's symptomatic and endemic of what's going on in America now. We see everyone breaking the norms, everyone just deciding that they can do what the heck they want to do, whatever, as my mother used to say, they're big and bad enough to do. And he figures he's big and bad enough to go ahead and spend that money. And so far, it's worked out for him.
Yeah. Power 96 says 90% of the people in Mississippi that apply for SNAP benefits are denied. Isn't that something? Real quick, Attorney Tarver, as we close, prosecutor Jack Smith, special prosecutor Jack Smith, has asked for a January 2nd trial date in the 2020 election case against Donald Trump. Of course, the Trump camp is asking for a 3-year delay. The judge is going to make a decision. She plans to make a decision later this month on when the trial will start. Your guess, your educated legal guess.
Yeah, having practiced in the federal courts as I have over the years, there will not be a January trial date. But what this judge will do with that January trial date is that's the marker. So you're not going to go too far off from there, as opposed to someone who might set the trial date in May, as Judge Cannon did, which will put you likely past the election. A January trial date being set at this point is probably going to put you somewhere in or around May. So there is likely to be a trial in the DC case long before the election. And that's what I think the DOJ wanted to make sure that they were able to do.
Yeah, that's and I thought of that too. All these cases, but the way it typically works, I mean, they could put this thing off until after the election. But the Fonnie Willis, for instance, she's going to have her case,
Maybe,
but that's probably won't be until 25.
maybe, could be. I'll believe it when I see it. Look, you've got to move forward with these things. As a prosecutor, you have an obligation. If you're saying that you're going to move forward with something, then you need to bring the case. And I hate that. I don't want to sound like I'm standing up for Donald Trump, but it's not fair to the person who is standing out there that you say you're going to bring something and you don't bring it.
Right.
Just you can't do that. You can't do it. So I urge her to move forward as soon as possible.
Well, apparently she's going to the grand jury on Tuesday, and expect that the grand jury is going to act quickly and making their decision. That's the expectation anyway. We'll see.
That's the expectation, but they were just interviewing witnesses as early as far as last week. So it's a little concerning for me because you give people fodder to be able to say that you're not acting in a way that's consistent with how prosecutors commonly act, and I don't want to see that.
Yeah. And one last question. I mentioned this on the show the other day, and I said specifically I wanted to ask you this question. Dan Abrams, Dan Abrams, was on the other day, said that Georgia shouldn't bring a case against Trump because what's been revealed there, the 12 charges she's looking at is the exact same charges that special counsel Jack Smith has brought, and that's federal. She should just stand down.
Well, that's precisely why she should bring a case, because there are two different sovereigns. And assuming that Donald Trump or someone who is favorable to him decides that if he's convicted, they would pardon him, they would have no control over a state case. So if he is convicted in Georgia, he would have to deal with the consequences of a Georgia conviction, and no president, congressperson, or any other federal figure could do anything about it. So I disagree with Dan. Look, I worked with Dan at Court TV many years ago, and we were both anchors. He's a bright guy, but I think that there's room, not only room, but there is an important lane to have both of these things occur at the same time, given the dynamic of what could happen with pardons.
Yeah, and that's why I go back to New York. It's the way New York is currently constituted. I think that will turn out to be the pivotal one, because Georgia, I could see the governor there giving him a pardon on the state level, and
or removing the prosecutor.
Or removing the prosecutor, exactly. And then, of course, federally, you and I talked about this in the past. Presidents tend to pardon other presidents, and if Trump wins, well, whatever. But he's not doing any time. New York, however, it's not favorable to any type of pardons or anything like that. He's not in the position there, so that makes sense.
But the problem with New York is that those, for the most part, are misdemeanors. So he's with no prior record, he's likely not to go to jail on the New York matters.
Well, it's so interesting, Attorney Tarver. So interesting. Thanks as always for your expertise. We certainly appreciate you, and I know you're busy, and we appreciate you. Have a great weekend, and everybody, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week.